The moment my wife screamed that we won the lottery, I knew I had to play along, because the real secret to that jackpot wasn't her ticket, but the one hidden in my own coat pocket. The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind of relentless, soul-drenching downpour that made the cheap linoleum floor of our tiny apartment feel even colder. I was hunched over the kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of instant coffee, the steam doing little to cut through the chill. Across from me, Sarah was practically vibrating with excitement, illuminated by the harsh glare of the overhead fluorescent bulb. She held a crumpled piece of paper in one hand, the Powerball ticket, and her phone in the other, rapidly refreshing the lottery website. We'd been together for 7 years. 7 years of me scraping by as a freelance graphic designer working 18-hour days. 7 years of Sarah dreaming aloud about yachts and Paris apartments, all while I silently managed the mounting credit card debt and the endless stream of rejection letters for my more serious business proposals. She was electric. I was solid, reliable, the grounding rod in her constant storm of ambition. "Just check the last number, David. Please, just check the last number again," she urged, her voice tight with hope that always bordered on desperation. I sighed, setting my mug down with a soft clink. I didn't need to check. I knew the winning numbers by heart. I'd memorized them the second they flashed across the screen during the midnight draw, not because I'd won, but because I had to confirm her numbers. "It's not going to happen, Sarah," I said, my voice flat. It was my default setting these days, the voice of quiet pragmatism that stifled her wildest flights of fancy. She glared at me, the familiar spark of resentment catching fire in her eyes. "Why are you always like this? Why do you always have to be the black cloud? Just one moment of belief, David. One moment where you don't treat my dreams like they're some childish fantasy." I opened my mouth, intending to apologize, to soothe, but she cut me off, her entire body stiffening as she stared at her phone screen. Her breath hitched. "No, wait, David, look." My heart, usually a steady, boring metronome, gave a single, alarming thump against my ribs. I leaned in slowly, watching the numbers on the screen resolve themselves against the smudged ink on her ticket. 6 numbers matched. 6. The grand prize jackpot. A number so staggering it seemed less like money and more like a geological event. Sarah let out a sound that was half scream, half sob, and then she was jumping up and down, knocking her chair backward. The ticket fluttered from her grasp onto the damp floor. "We won, David. We actually won. We're rich. We're finally free." She was crying freely now, throwing her arms around my neck, squeezing the air out of me. I stood there, stiff as concrete, absorbing the impact of her euphoria. I managed a weak pat on her back. That's incredible, Sarah, truly." She pulled back, her face shining with tears and manic joy. "Incredible? It's life-altering. You can quit that miserable design gig. We can buy that stupid loft downtown. We can finally get rid of that awful, leaky roof." Then the shift happened. As quickly as the joy had arrived, it coalesced into something sharp and directed, focusing entirely on me. She took a deep, shaky breath, her smile turning predatory. "You know what the best part is, David?" she purred, grabbing her phone again, the laminated ticket clutched like a holy relic. "The best part is, I don't have to listen to you tell me that my ideas are impractical anymore. I don't have to watch you sit there sipping that cheap instant sludge while you tell me to be realistic." "Realistic? Look at this reality, David. You were so focused on keeping us afloat with your microscopic checks, you never even tried to win big." She paced the small kitchen, brandishing the ticket like a weapon. "You know how many tickets I bought this week? 10. 10 chances. And you? You bought 1 2 months ago when you were feeling adventurous, and you immediately threw it away because you knew it was pointless. You had no faith, zero ambition. You're a man who settled for mediocrity, and now you get to watch me ascend past it." Her words were acid, but they didn't burn me. They merely washed over the surface, like water over stone. I felt nothing but a deep, cold calm. "I'm going to call my sister first," she declared, already dialing. "She'll know what to do. You just try to look happy for 5 minutes, okay? Try to pretend you're not drowning in jealousy because your ticket was empty and mine is overflowing." She turned her back on me, plunging into a loud, excited conversation about lawyers and new cars, leaving me alone in the quiet aftermath of her victory speech. I watched her triumphant silhouette against the window, the rain still lashing down. I slowly pushed my chair back, the sound barely audible over Sarah's high-pitched giggling on the phone. I walked past the spilled chair, my eyes scanning the floor until they landed on the crumpled slip of paper she had carelessly discarded when she embraced me. It was my ticket, the one she thought I'd thrown away months ago. I bent down, my fingers closing around the edges of the cheap, flimsy paper. It was damp, stained slightly with coffee residue from where it had fallen near my mug. I smoothed it out carefully on the table beside the winning numbers Sarah was screaming about. Then I looked at the 6 numbers printed on my ticket, comparing them against the official, confirmed results one last time. They matched perfectly. Every single digit. The jackpot wasn't just hers. It was mine, too. A shared prize. Except she didn't know I held an identical key to the vault she was currently celebrating opening solo. I looked back at Sarah, who was now gesturing wildly, telling her sister that she was changing her name legally to something more glamorous. She had already claimed full ownership of our shared future, mocking my lack of vision, my failure to grasp true fortune. And that's when the cold calm settled into something predatory within me. I wasn't just a passenger in her victory. I was holding the secret twin engine. But if she thought this was freedom, she had no idea what real power looked like. I slid my own ticket into my wallet, the faint scent of damp paper mixing with the leather. If she wanted to play the role of the triumphant winner who had overcome the dead weight of her unambitious partner, fine, I would let her. But she wouldn't be celebrating alone for long. I just had to decide how I was going to reveal that the man she mocked held just as much claim to that mountain of cash, and that maybe, just maybe, I didn't actually want to share it with the woman who had just publicly humiliated me. I watched her hang up the phone, beaming down at me, her eyes glittering with contempt and expectation. "So, David," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "what do you think we should do with all this money?" I met her gaze, my expression utterly neutral, the secret burning bright behind my eyes. "I think," I replied softly, "we should wait until after the official confirmation tomorrow. Just to be sure everything is absolutely, legally sound." And as I spoke the word legally, a dark, thrilling thought crystallized. I knew the exact legal loophole that would ensure I received the entire payout if the primary claimant was deemed mentally unfit to handle the sudden windfall. I had researched it months ago, back when I was still designing logos for local dentists and dreaming about a quiet future. It was a contingency plan for a disaster that never happened, until now. The next morning, the rain had subsided, replaced by a brittle, anxious sunshine that did nothing to warm the apartment. Sarah was already dressed in her best power suit, a sharp navy ensemble she usually reserved for job interviews she never got, and she was meticulously applying makeup as if preparing for a royal coronation. "The Lottery Commission office opens at 9, David. We need to be there at 8:30 sharp," she announced, not bothering to look at me in the reflection of the bathroom mirror. "I've already drafted an email to my boss, telling him I won't be in for the foreseeable future. I used the word unforeseen circumstances of overwhelming personal triumph. Very classy, don't you think?" I was leaning against the doorframe, nursing my second cup of coffee. Real, expensive Guatemalan roast I'd bought yesterday, not the instant sludge she'd mocked. The air between us was thick with unspoken negotiation. She saw me as the slow, compliant accountant who would meekly sign the necessary papers, allowing her to glide into her new life. She didn't see the man who had spent the last decade quietly observing her every flaw and every aspiration. "I'll drive," I said. "We should keep a low profile until we've officially claimed it." She scoffed, finally turning around, her painted smile freezing on her face. Drive? David, please. I am not pulling up to the state lottery headquarters in your 15-year-old Honda Civic. It screams new money desperation. We are going to take a cab, or better yet, I'm calling an Uber Black. I want every person we pass to know we are no longer operating on a budget. The sheer pettiness of the slight didn't even register as anger anymore. It was just data confirming my assessment. She was already spending the money in her head, and I hadn't even stepped foot inside the lottery commission building. We took the Uber Black. Sarah spent the entire 20-minute ride practicing her gracious winner face in the tinted window and dictating a text message to her sister about installing a full-sized aquarium in the master bathroom of our new penthouse. I sat beside her, silent, my own ticket resting securely against my chest, tucked deep inside my breast pocket, shielded by my heavy wool coat. The lottery commission building was surprisingly drab, a fortress of beige concrete. A few reporters lurked outside, hoping for a scoop, but the main entrance was controlled. Sarah, spotting the small gathering of media, immediately brightened. "Smile for the cameras, David," she instructed, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "Look overwhelmed. Look like the loyal, supportive partner who never gave up on me." We navigated the lobby, a tense game of maneuvering where Sarah aggressively pushed ahead, claiming ownership of the space. We were ushered into a sterile, soundproof conference room where two stern-looking lawyers and a very cheerful lottery commissioner waited. The commissioner, a man named Mr. Henderson, with a tie the color of faded mustard, extended his hand first to Sarah. "Congratulations, Ms. Davies. This is truly remarkable. We just need you to verify the ticket and go over the payout options." Sarah laid her ticket down on the polished mahogany table with the reverence of a priest laying out relics. She recited the numbers flawlessly. Mr. Henderson checked them against his terminal. The electronic chime sounded, confirming the match. "That's it," Sarah whispered, breathless. "We did it." "Indeed," Mr. Henderson said, looking slightly less cheerful now that the reality of the paperwork had set in. "Now, Ms. Davies, before we finalize the tax implications and lump sum versus annuity choices, we need the second ticket holder to sign off, as this was purchased during the period of your recorded common-law marriage." Sarah froze, mid-smirk. She turned slowly, her eyes wide, searching my face. "Second ticket holder? David, what is he talking about?" My heart rate finally picked up, but it was fueled by anticipation, not fear. This was the moment. I reached inside my coat, pulling out the slightly crumpled, still slightly damp ticket. I placed it directly beside hers, perfectly centered on the table. "Because, Sarah," I said, my voice steady and clear in the quiet room, "when you were busy buying 10 tickets on a whim, I bought one ticket 2 months ago, covering all the birthdays and anniversaries we ever had. And I checked the numbers last night, just like I told you I would." Sarah stared at my ticket, then back at hers, her face draining of color until the expensive makeup looked clownish. The 2 layers of paper, 2 identical keys to astronomical wealth, lay side by side. You lying bastard," she hissed, suddenly abandoning all pretense of decorum. "You kept this from me? You let me celebrate? You let me mock you?" One of the lawyers cleared his throat nervously. "Ms. Davies, Mr. Evans, if both tickets match the grand prize draw, the funds will be split evenly, minus applicable taxes, between the 2 ticket holders." Sarah lunged across the table, not for the money, but for my throat. "No, it's mine. I was the one who checked. I was the one who validated it. You were just sitting there, waiting to sabotage me." I sidestepped her clumsy grab with practiced ease. The lawyers scrambled to intervene. "Order! Order in the room!" Mr. Henderson exclaimed, pushing his chair back. "We need to separate you both." As the lawyers tried to physically restrain a hysterical Sarah, I leaned toward Mr. Henderson, keeping my voice low and utterly sincere. "Mr. Henderson, before we split anything, I need to address the legal point. While Sarah is correct that we were in a common law relationship until yesterday afternoon, I need to present a prenuptial agreement drafted privately 3 years ago, which clearly states that any assets acquired during the marriage are subject to arbitration if one party displays documented evidence of financial recklessness or extreme emotional instability in the immediate aftermath of a significant life event. Sarah stopped struggling, staring at me in horror. A prenup? We never signed a prenup. We didn't sign it, Sarah, I corrected her coolly, but my lawyer filed a declaration of intent with the state court registry that served as an initial binding agreement pending full execution. You may recall that 3 years ago you threatened to empty our joint savings account to invest in that blockchain scheme involving artisanal sourdough starters. I consulted counsel immediately. I produced a sealed document from my inner coat pocket, sliding it across the table toward the commissioner, bypassing Sarah entirely. I believe this document proves that I was prepared for exactly this kind of volatile reaction. If you examine the addendum, Section C, regarding sudden, unmanaged wealth acquisition, I believe it disqualifies the claimant who initiated the celebration and displayed clear signs of volatile behavior. Mr. Henderson looked from the document to Sarah's face, which was now a mask of fury and terror, and back to my calm, unreadable expression. He adjusted his mustard tie, his professional demeanor returning with a snap. "Mr. Evans," he said slowly, picking up the sealed envelope, "if this declaration is validated by our legal team, and if we find that Ms. Davies' reaction constitutes the extreme instability outlined here." He trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. If he validated the prenup's terms, Sarah got nothing. The entire prize would revert to the only stable, non-volatile claimant, me. Sarah broke free from the lawyer holding her arm and lunged again, this time seizing my discarded coffee cup and flinging the remaining cold sludge directly into my face. "You planned this, you manipulative snake. You never loved me. You just waited for my win so you could steal it," she screamed, tears of rage cutting clean paths through the makeup on her cheeks. I blinked the cold coffee from my eyes, tasting the bitter dregs. I didn't flinch. I just looked her dead in the eye, the chaos around us fading into white noise. "I didn't plan your win, Sarah," I said, my voice dropping to a venomous whisper only she could hear over the noise. "But I did plan your exit." And just as Mr. Henderson was reaching for his phone to call his legal team to confirm the validity of the obscure registry filing, the door to the conference room burst open. A frantic-looking woman in a poorly tailored suit rushed in, holding a sheaf of papers. "Mr. Henderson, stop everything. We have a major issue," she gasped, clutching her side. "We just received an emergency court injunction regarding the Powerball draw from last night. Someone contested the winning numbers based on a technical flaw in the drawing mechanism itself." The frantic woman, who I later learned was a junior clerk from the State Attorney General's office, looked like she'd run a marathon in those cheap heels. The air in the room, already thick with Sarah's histrionics and the lingering smell of cold coffee, instantly turned icy with bureaucratic dread. Mr. Henderson paled, dropping the sealed envelope containing my potential winning ticket like it was radioactive. "An injunction? On this draw? That's impossible. We followed protocol to the letter." "Not according to the preliminary findings, sir," the clerk stammered, shoving a copy of the court order onto the table directly in front of my identical tickets. "There was a power surge reported in the central facility precisely 3 seconds before the final ball dropped. It caused a momentary lag in the electronic sequencing that might have affected the integrity of the final number selection. We are putting a complete hold on all payouts related to the grand prize until a full forensic audit is completed. That could take weeks, months." Sarah stopped mid-shriek, her mouth hanging open. The sudden transition from ultimate victory to absolute bureaucratic limbo was apparently too much for her system. She simply slumped into the chair she had previously occupied like a deposed queen. "Weeks? Months?" she choked out, her voice barely a rasp. "We have to wait? I already told my boss to buy a yacht." I remained standing, the only person in the room whose posture didn't change. The injunction was unexpected, certainly, but it didn't erase the inherent conflict between Sarah and me. It simply put a pause button on the immediate distribution of funds. For Sarah, a pause was a death sentence. She thrived on immediate gratification. For me, it was time. Time to ensure my legal maneuvering wasn't just a bluff against a prenuptial document she hadn't known existed. "What exactly are they auditing, precisely?" I asked the clerk, my tone measured, professional, the opposite of Sarah's disintegrating composure. "The physical ball randomization apparatus," she replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "If the lag caused any ball to remain in the selection chamber longer than statistically permissible, the entire drawing is voided. It's a nightmare. We've had 2 other claimants show up already, based on rumors from the early press reports, and they're demanding hearings." 2 other claimants. Great. Now, instead of a straightforward duel between Sarah and me, I was potentially entering a legal free-for-all where the prize money could be tied up in court for years, or worse, declared invalid entirely. I slowly retrieved my ticket from the table, ignoring Sarah's pleading glare. I tucked it safely back inside my coat. My secret winning ticket was now technically worthless paperwork pending audit, but its potential value remained the leverage point. "Mr. Henderson," I said, turning my attention back to the commissioner, "given the injunction, the agreement regarding Ms. Davies' eligibility is now moot, as there is no current asset to divide. However, I have retained counsel, and I need assurance that my ticket, a verified match prior to the injunction, will be treated separately from Ms. Davies' contested claim, should the drawing be upheld." Henderson looked utterly defeated. "Mr. Evans, we can't guarantee anything until the audit is complete. Right now, both tickets are in legal limbo." Sarah suddenly found a terrifying surge of energy. She bolted upright, grabbed the copy of the injunction, and ripped it in half. "No, I'm not waiting. I'm going public. I'll call every news station myself. I'll paint them as incompetent thieves who are trying to steal my money." She spun around to me, her eyes blazing with a desperate cunning I hadn't seen before. "Listen to me, David. You have your little secret ticket, fine. But I have the narrative. I am the face of the winner. If you try to claim this money while I'm telling the world that you tried to sabotage my moment of joy, the court of public opinion will crush you. You'll be broke and disgraced, and I'll get the money eventually, proving you acted in bad faith." She was right about the narrative. The media loved a story of sudden fortune, and they loved a jealous partner trying to claw back glory. My quiet, analytical approach looked awfully suspicious when juxtaposed against her public, tearful declaration of victory from last night. I needed to move fast before she flooded the airwaves with her version of events. "You want to go public, Sarah?" I asked, a genuine, terrifying smile finally spreading across my face. "Fine, let's go public." I reached into my wallet, pulling out not my ticket, but a thick manila envelope I'd slipped in there last night, just in case. I pushed it toward the stunned commissioner. "Mr. Henderson, before you deal with an injunction on the numbers, I suggest you look at the purchaser details," I stated calmly. "This envelope contains affidavits from my former landlord and 2 neighbors from my old address downtown. They confirm that 2 months ago, when I supposedly bought that pointless ticket, I was living in a separate residence from Ms. Davies. Furthermore, this envelope contains a sworn statement detailing how Ms. Davies, under the guise of helping me organize my receipts last week, took possession of my wallet and made unauthorized purchases." Sarah's face went from fury to utter blankness. "What purchases?" she whispered, though the lawyers and the clerk were now leaning in intently. "Specifically," I continued, savoring the moment, "she used my debit card while I was out of town for a client meeting to purchase a plane ticket for her sister to fly in from overseas, scheduled to arrive next Tuesday. She clearly intended to celebrate with her family using my funds, under the pretense that I was buying the tickets. The bank records are time-stamped. If she's trying to claim sole ownership of a winning ticket purchased before we moved in together, based on a narrative of my malice, I think the court should consider whether she's been transparent about all her financial dealings." The clerk gasped audibly. Henderson's eyes darted between the envelope and Sarah's suddenly frozen expression. Sarah looked like she was drowning on dry land. She knew that specific trip. She had insisted on paying for her sister's ticket herself, claiming she didn't want me to worry about the expense. But she hadn't paid cash. She had used my card, assuming I'd never noticed the small withdrawal amidst our bills. "You set me up," Sarah finally managed, her voice shaking with betrayal. "No, Sarah," I corrected her, picking up my coffee-stained ticket one last time. "I just waited for you to make your move. The injunction stalls the money, giving my lawyer time to prove that you've been financially deceptive for years, making your claim to the sole winner narrative, and any financial claim whatsoever, highly questionable." Mr. Henderson tapped the desk sharply. "We need to call the Attorney General's office immediately. This changes everything. We have potentially 2 legitimate ticket holders, one of whom is now under review for financial misconduct, and a potential voiding of the entire draw." As Henderson reached for his phone, Sarah made one final desperate lunge. She didn't go for me this time. She dove for the table, snatching up both tickets. "If I can't have it, no one can," she shrieked, tearing toward the conference room door, her goal clear: shred the evidence and destroy both our claims simultaneously. But before she could reach the exit, the door was flung open again. This time, it wasn't a clerk. It was a man in a crisp, dark suit who looked far too important for a standard lottery office. He held a thick, official-looking binder, and his expression was grim. "Commissioner Henderson, stop all proceedings immediately," the man commanded, his voice cutting through the room like a razor. "The injunction was only the first layer of protection. We have just received a sealed warrant based on new intelligence. That ticket," he pointed a sharp finger directly at the tickets clutched in Sarah's trembling hands, "is invalid. Not because of the power surge, but because the entire drawing has been compromised by organized criminal activity." The numbers themselves were known in advance. The winning ticket, both matching tickets, are subject to immediate seizure as evidence in a federal investigation. The man in the dark suit, who introduced himself only as Agent Thorne from a department I certainly didn't recognize, moved with terrifying efficiency. He ignored Sarah completely, focusing solely on the 2 pieces of paper she was still desperately trying to rip apart. "Ma'am, release the evidence immediately," Thorne ordered, his voice calm but carrying the unmistakable weight of federal authority. "Resisting seizure is a separate felony." Sarah's face crumpled. The fight went out of her in a visible wave. She dropped the tickets as if they had suddenly burst into flames. The 2 matching slips of paper fluttered down onto the beige industrial carpet, mine slightly damp, hers slightly crumpled from her initial celebration. Thorne's partner, a woman with an expression carved from granite, moved in instantly, retrieving the tickets with gloved hands and placing them carefully inside a specialized evidence pouch. "Compromised? Organized criminal activity?" Mr. Henderson stammered, looking faint. "But we verified the numbers independently." "The verification process was flawed, Commissioner," Thorne explained, gesturing toward the clerk who was now visibly shaking. "The lag wasn't random. It was introduced. We have evidence suggesting the winning numbers were known to an insider who sold that information to an organized syndicate, hoping to profit from a guaranteed win. Your initial draw has been flagged. Anyone claiming one of these specific ticket numbers is now considered a person of interest in an ongoing investigation." My mind raced. Federal investigation, organized crime. This was far beyond the quiet, personal revenge I had planned against Sarah. My secret winning ticket had just become evidence in a felony case. Sarah finally found her voice, but it was high-pitched and manic. "Me! He's the one! He bought his ticket months ago! He's the one with the secret history! Check his financials! I just bought mine last night!" Thorne's gaze snapped to me. I felt the heat of his scrutiny, but unlike Sarah's volatile reaction, mine was calculated. "Mr. Evans," Thorne said, "you are also holding a ticket matching these numbers." I didn't deny it. I didn't flinch. I reached into my breast pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out my wallet. I extracted a business card, not my freelance design card, but a crisp, new card from a boutique firm I'd quietly established 3 years ago, using seed money from a small inheritance Sarah didn't know about. The card read, David Hayes, lead investigator, private asset recovery and risk assessment. Agent Thorne, I said, offering him the card, and then pointing to the empty space on the table where my ticket had been moments before. I am not a person of interest. I am already aware of the underlying corruption concerning the state lottery system. I've been tracking it for nearly 18 months, utilizing my own resources. I was attempting to verify the extent of the compromise using my own ticket as an internal litmus test before reporting it to the appropriate federal authorities. Sarah let out a sound of pure, strangled disbelief. "You're what?" "He's a plant, Thorne," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He works for them. He manufactured the prenup. He knew about the power surge. He set this whole thing up to frame me and steal the win." Thorne raised a hand, silencing her immediately. He looked at my card and back at me, his expression shifting from suspicion to professional curiosity. "You've been investigating the state lottery system, mister." "Hayes? Why?" "Because," I explained smoothly, stepping into the role I'd prepared for years but never intended to actually play. My initial asset recovery investigation targeted a shell corporation known for high-volume, statistically improbable lottery ticket purchasing in multiple states. That syndicate, which I believe you've just identified, uses insiders to get winning numbers hours before the official broadcast. My goal was to expose the syndicate and recover assets. I tapped my empty breast pocket. My ticket was purchased legitimately, long before the known breach timeline. I bought it as a control sample. I intended to turn both tickets, mine and Ms. Davies, over to the proper authorities the moment I confirmed her purchase was also legitimate, suspecting she might have inadvertently purchased a ticket with compromised information. Thorne studied me for a long moment, his eyes assessing every detail of my composure. Sarah was sobbing uncontrollably, realizing that her grand performance had not only failed to secure the money, but had positioned her as the primary suspect, while I had effortlessly slid into the role of the federal asset. "Where is your ticket now, Mr. Hayes?" Thorne asked, his tone suddenly respectful. "My ticket," I replied, allowing a sliver of weariness to cross my face, "is currently secured in a safe deposit box, ready for immediate transfer to your evidence team, pending an official warrant executed on my person. I didn't want to carry highly sensitive evidence into a public office when I was expecting to file a simple claim." Thorne nodded curtly. "Good foresight, Mr. Hayes. That will save us significant time." He pulled a heavy-duty electronic tablet from his binder. "We are placing a temporary hold on all financial actions related to both of you, pending the audit. Ms. Davies, you need to come with us for preliminary questioning regarding the transfer of funds to your sister." Sarah looked up, her eyes wide with terror, as Thorne's partner gently placed a hand on her arm. "No, David, don't let them take me. We won. We're supposed to be rich." As they began to escort a bewildered and distraught Sarah out, Thorne turned back to me, holding the tablet. "Mr. Hayes, your cooperation is noted. We will be in touch regarding the status of your ticket once the forensics on the draw mechanism are complete. In the meantime, remain accessible." He paused at the door, glancing back at me, the only man left standing in the silent, sterile room. "And Mr. Hayes, about that prenup declaration you filed 3 years ago. We pulled the registry abstract just now. It's valid, technically, but," Thorne leaned in conspiratorially, his voice dropping low, "our initial intelligence suggests the syndicate's insider who leaked the numbers was actually Sarah's sister, the one you were just trying to save from fraud charges." My carefully constructed calm shattered. Sarah's sister, the one she was rushing to buy a penthouse aquarium for, was the key to the entire criminal operation, and I had just used my supposed innocent ticket and my fabricated background to position myself as the federal hero, inadvertently protecting the true criminal by trying to use evidence against Sarah. "What?" I managed, my throat suddenly dry. Thorne straightened up, his face unreadable again. "We need to talk, Mr. Hayes. A lot more has just opened up than just a lottery claim, and I suggest you tell me everything you really know about that sourdough starter investment." The silence that followed Agent Thorne's revelation was deafening. The sterile conference room suddenly felt less like a place of bureaucratic drama and more like an interrogation cell. my carefully constructed fortress of composure, built on years of observing Sarah's chaos and preparing for a quiet, personal victory, had just been breached by the very federal agency I was pretending to cooperate with. Sarah's sister Chloe, the recipient of the hastily purchased plane ticket and the implied financial recklessness, my proof of Sarah's instability had inadvertently implicated the actual criminal linchpin. Thorne hadn't just seen a potential hero, he'd seen a deeply involved player with a suspicious amount of advanced knowledge regarding the lottery's weakest points. "Mr. Hayes," Thorne repeated, his tone now completely devoid of warmth, "I suggest you drop the facade. The evidence suggests you are either deeply involved in this scheme or you are an astonishingly lucky amateur who managed to stumble into a federal racketeering investigation while trying to cheat on your taxes." I stared at the empty space where Sarah had stood moments before, realizing the bitter irony. She was being hauled away because she had tried to immediately spend the money, while I was now facing scrutiny for knowing about the money too precisely. I took a deep breath, letting the cold reality settle. The game had changed from domestic revenge to federal evasion. My best chance now wasn't to pretend to be a hero. It was to leverage the only real truth I still held. "Agent Thorne," I said, meeting his gaze directly, "I am not involved with the syndicate, I assure you. My involvement with Sarah was purely personal, and my knowledge of the lottery's internal vulnerabilities, including the existence of that prenuptial declaration, was solely based on protecting myself from her known patterns of financial instability." I leaned forward, pushing my investigator business card across the table again, this time with purpose. I was tracking the syndicate, but through independent private channels. I identified the Shell Corporation 3 years ago when they tried to launder funds through an online platform I briefly consulted for. I built my own portfolio, the one I used to establish that Shell firm, to trace their movements. I haven't earned the title of lead investigator legally, but I've earned it through 18 months of unpaid, dangerous work. I tapped the spot on the table where my ticket had lain. My ticket is clean. It was purchased months before the leak was scheduled to occur. If you audit the purchase records, you will find my transaction timestamps are authentic, while Ms. Davies' ticket purchase, made yesterday, will match the known time window for the insider information dissemination. Thorne considered this, tapping his tablet thoughtfully. "If your ticket is clean, Mr. Hayes, you are a witness, not a suspect. However, you still have a massive conflict of interest with the woman who is now central to the conspiracy." "The conflict is resolved," I stated firmly. "I want the entirety of my claim honored, independent of Ms. Davies' involvement. Furthermore, I will provide you with every piece of data my private firm has collected on the syndicate, including the contact information for the Shell corporations and the timeline of the money laundering, provided my ticket is validated as legitimate and separate from the compromised funds." Thorne paused, a slight, almost imperceptible nod signaling his decision. "Cooperation buys time, Mr. Hayes. We need that data. We'll run forensics on both tickets now. If yours clears the timestamp analysis against the breach schedule, we will isolate it. If Ms. Davies' ticket matches the insider leak schedule, she is facing RICO charges, not just lottery fraud." The next 6 hours were a blur of sterile rooms, coffee that tasted like battery acid, and intense scrutiny. I watched as forensic specialists meticulously examined the ink, the paper aging, and the digital purchase receipts for both tickets. Sarah, now subdued and sitting in a separate room with a public defender, had stopped screaming and had settled into a silent, furious breakdown. Finally, Thorne returned to the small room where I was being held. He placed 2 separate case files on the table. "Mr. Hayes, your ticket is clean," he confirmed, his voice flat. "The purchase timestamp predates the system compromise by 147 days. It is validated. The winnings, net of taxes, are yours alone, pending the outcome of the criminal case against the syndicate and Ms. Davies." Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. I had won. Not just the money, but the silence, the clean slate, the escape from Sarah's suffocating expectations. And Sarah? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Her ticket, Thorne said, sliding the second file toward me. Her purchase matches the compromised window exactly. The syndicate had a buyer waiting for the numbers. She unknowingly bought one of those advance tickets. Her sister Chloe arranged the initial purchase of that ticket through a burner account, intending to cash out when the system went public. Sarah was just the enthusiastic mule. He looked me over, sizing up the man who had navigated this minefield. You played a very dangerous game, Mr. Hayes. You used the threat of your own winning ticket to leverage a position of power against your partner, and in doing so, you stumbled directly into the path of a major federal investigation. You're lucky your meticulous nature extended to keeping clean records. I picked up the file pertaining to my own win. The number felt abstract, unreal. What happens to Sarah now? She's facing severe fraud and conspiracy charges, though her cooperation moving forward, especially against her sister, will determine the severity of the sentence. She won't see daylight anytime soon. And for the record, Mr. Hayes, that prenup filing, that was brilliant. It gave you the legal standing to separate yourself instantly when things went sideways. He stood up, signaling the interview was over. We'll be in touch about your asset recovery data. For now, you are free to go. Congratulations on your winnings, Mr. Hayes. You managed to turn a potential disaster into a clean separation and a massive fortune. I walked out of the Lottery Commission building an hour later. The sun was setting, bathing the city in a deceptive golden light. I didn't look back at the annex, where Sarah was signing her statement against her sister. I drove my own car, the reliable Honda Civic, to my own small rented apartment. I walked into the quiet space, no longer filled with the sound of Sarah's dreams or her scorn. The coffee grounds were still in the machine, the bills still stacked neatly on the desk. But now, the stack held no dread. It was just clutter. I sat down at the table, not reaching for a design brief, but for the keys to the safe deposit box. The sheer weight of the secured claim settled upon me. I had everything I'd ever wanted: financial freedom, quiet control, and complete autonomy. I looked around the cramped room, the space that had always felt too small for my potential, and felt a surge of true, unburdened peace. I didn't need a penthouse or a yacht. I needed stability. I opened the drawer and pulled out my old, worn leather wallet, the one Sarah had mocked, the one she had tried to empty. I slipped the newly validated claim documents inside, right beside the very first, pristine business card for my real investigation firm. I had won the lottery, yes, but more importantly, I had won the narrative of my own life. I smiled for the first time in years, a genuine, private smile reserved for the man who was finally, truly free. Then my phone buzzed. It was a secure, encrypted text from Agent Thorne. Hayes, just a heads up, Chloe Davies has been detained. Before we locked her down, she managed to send one final, panicked message to a contact overseas. The message wasn't about the money. It was a threat. And the recipient? They have your home address.